More than 250 million people live in a country other than the one they were born in. In other words, they're immigrants. And, dear viewer, this number, it doesn't stop growing. In the last 50 years, it has multiplied by 3, and only since the year 2000, the number of immigrants has increased by 80 million. That's 80 million more people who've left their country in search of a better life.
We are the dreamers of USA.
And as you can imagine, most of the world's immigrants, more than 65%, have settled in the richest countries, such as the United States, Germany, Australia, and Canada. And it is precisely this fact that is feeding all over the world controversial, furious, and bitter debates on immigration and the discourse of many populist movements. In recent years, in Europe for example, we've seen a lot of populist and xenophobic parties emerging which have targeted immigration directly. You've certainly heard it all. What if they steal our jobs, put us in danger, destroy our national identity, etc., etc., etc. But perhaps the most outstanding case of all of this is Donald Trump. He's made it very clear that he is a president who really doesn't like immigration, except, under really certain circumstances.
President Trump balked at an immigration deal that would include protections for people from Haiti and some nations in Africa, demanding to know why he should accept immigrants from, quote, whole countries rather than from places like Norway.
Why on earth would Trump think that Norwegians want to immigrate en masse to the United States when they are already richer than Americans? In fact, more people are moving from the US to Norway than the other way around. But let us not stray too far from today's topic, because what we're really looking at today is whether immigration is actually a danger. Is it a burden on society? We want to look at whether the United States is losing economic momentum because of all the immigrants that are coming into the country. We want to look at whether the US should stop the arrival of more foreigners. So, let's dive in. Now, if there is one thing that we can all agree on, it's that we live in an increasingly interconnected world. That is, a world where it's becoming easier, faster, and cheaper to go from one place to another. And it's also a world where it's easier to connect with our loved ones no matter where they are. And as you can imagine, all of these things make the decision to pack up and move to another country much, much easier. That's why if there were 90 million immigrants around the world in the 60s, today there are more than 250 million. And you know what? We can only expect this number to grow strongly in the upcoming years. First, it's because it's becoming easier to move, and second, because of the huge demographic growth that many poor countries are experiencing. So, dear viewer, the real question that we want to get back to is there a reason to worry? Well, listen up.
A lucky break?
Whenever rich countries talk about immigration, it sounds like they're debating whether or not to engage in some sort of charity. And you know what? Nothing could actually be further from the truth here. Immigration favors economic growth, among other things, because most immigrants are adults of working age. Therefore, it's been calculated that since the year 2000, immigrants have been responsible for 40 to 80% of their main recipient countries' workforce growth. So let's be honest, without them, these countries, they'd be far less wealthy. But yes, I know, this is all very abstract. If you want to see exactly how this happens in one of the countries where immigration has caused a lot of controversy, well, let's have a look at the United Kingdom. In recent years, while some political groups warned about the enormous threat that immigration, including immigrants coming from other European countries, posed for British jobs, identity, and way of life, the truth is that the economy has placed very, very different numbers on the table. Never before in history have so many people been employed in the United Kingdom as there are today, neither in absolute or relative terms. And it doesn't even matter if we exclude immigrants here. Never before has the British population had as many job opportunities as they do right now. And not only that, according to studies from several British universities, all these immigrants pay more taxes than they get in benefits from the state, and if that weren't enough, the UK is managing to attract more university immigrants than any other European country. In other words, the effect of this immigration is very, very positive for the British, and it's also helping turn the United Kingdom into a technological powerhouse. Not bad, right? Well, you know what? Despite Trump's fiery speeches, the truth is that on the other side of the pond, things aren't really any different. Listen to this.
The North American dream.
With just over 44 million people, which is more or less the population of Spain, the United States is, in absolute terms, the country with the most immigrants in the world. However, wait just a moment, because in relative terms, things are rather different. These 44 million people represent just under 14% of the entire population. To give you a better idea here, in countries like Australia or New Zealand, for example, the percentage is almost twice as high. Now, here is a big question for you, and please don't cheat and Google it. What impact do you think immigration has had on the United States? Well, dear viewer, listen up. Despite representing just under 14% of the population, immigrants are responsible for almost 25% of all businesses that open in the United States. They're also responsible for more than 30% of the companies in which venture capital funds invest, and almost half of all Silicon Valley high-tech startups are started by immigrants. And that's not all we'll hear. According to a study from the Center for American Entrepreneurship, 43% of the 500 largest companies in the United States were founded either by immigrants or the children of immigrants.
Fine. Yes, I'd love to. 3 weeks ago, we bought another Ford, the new low-priced custom line Victoria.
That's 216 companies whose revenues surpass $5 trillion every year and employ almost 13 million people all around the world. We're talking about nearly half of the great US economic powerhouse. From Henry Ford to Elon Musk, many of the great figures and iconic characters of the United States, they weren't even born in that country. Now, hold on just a moment, because I bet some of you are probably thinking right now, well, okay, Simon, but those are only a few immigrants, the most educated ones. I mean, what about all of the rest, Simon? Well, the truth is that the numbers, they don't vary much here either. Their entrepreneurship and employment rates, they're also really high. And by the way, they also provide several other benefits. For example, in a country that at the moment has pretty much full employment, new immigrants reinforce the US's competitiveness, encourage the rest of the American population to do more, and allow for many businesses that would have otherwise not existed to be created. So, in summary, immigrants reduce the population's average age, they have more children, are more educated and more enterprising, they file more patents, and, well, the list it goes on. And if you think about it for a second, it does make a lot of sense. On the one hand, these people arrive to achieve a better future, so they're willing to take risks and work really hard. Now, on the other hand, they've had different experiences and education, and they can take advantage of this in order to progress. Think, for example, of Italian pizzas or Mexican tacos that flood the US today, as well as the rest of the world. Well, despite these arguments and the fact that never before have so many Americans had jobs, politicians like Donald Trump still don't like immigration. But you know what? This isn't the first time that the US political leaders have spoken out against immigration.
It has become the issue in the governor's race. Pete Wilson, a 187 supporter, is pinning his re-election hopes on anti-immigrant sentiment.
Precedents.
Dear viewer, this is by no means that the United States, the country of immigrants, has had political campaigns against them. You see, in the middle of the 19th century, the political movement Know Nothing opposed immigration, particularly from the Irish, and soon after, they focused on the Chinese. Yep, you heard that right, they were focusing on the Chinese. During the second half of the 19th century, many Chinese came to the United States, and that triggered a rather hostile popular reaction.
From Seattle to Los Angeles, from Wyoming to the small towns of California, immigrants from China were forced out of business, run out of town, beaten, tortured, lynched, and massacred, usually with little hope of help from the law. Immigration, a work from the Library of Congress.
All this because, at that time, Americans saw the Chinese as the competition. And in 1882, the Federal Congress itself approved the Law of Exclusion of the Chinese, which not only suspended the arrival of new Chinese immigrants, but also made the lives of those who were already in the US rather complicated. And that wasn't all. In 1924, after around 30 million people had crossed the Atlantic Ocean to reach the US, Washington established a quota policy that greatly reduced the number of immigrants that could arrive, and they also vetoed immigrants from southern Europe, such as Spain and Italy, as well as Eastern Europe, Asia, and Africa. So basically, the few who could enter, they had to be Anglo-Saxons. And more recently, in 1994, the then governor of California, Pete Wilson, blamed Hispanic immigrants for the state's poor economic situation. And you want to know what he did? Well, he launched a huge political campaign against immigration and pushed the so-called Proposition 187, a law that prevented access to social, educational, and even health services for all illegal immigrants. And yes, this included children. It was so aggressive that just a year later, the Supreme Court declared it unconstitutional.
We are going to take back California for the working, tax-paying families of this state.
Well, the fact is that despite all these campaigns against immigration, existing research shows that states and counties that historically had more immigration now have a higher income, less poverty, less unemployment, and better educational results. So with all this data in mind, it might be good for both the White House and the Capitol to focus less on how to deport people and more on how to strengthen access and try to approve once and for all a migratory reform that facilitates the orderly arrival of more people, more workers, more entrepreneurs, and more researchers. All of this would greatly aid the North American economy. By the way, in a future video, which we'll try to make available very soon for our Patreon page and later here on this channel, we're going to discuss the great myths that exist about immigration. But now, well, it's your turn. Do you think your country should reduce the entry of immigrants, or should they increase it? Well, leave your answer in the comments below, as well as in this survey, and I really hope you enjoyed this video. Please do hit that like button if you did, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for brand new videos. Don't forget to check out our friends at the Reconsider Media podcast. They provided the vocals in this episode that were not mine. And as always, thank you for watching.
It has become the issue in the governor's race. Pete Wilson, a 187 supporter, is pinning his re-election hopes on anti-immigrant sentiment.